Prime was a world of shining towers and silver skies. Floating gardens drifted above crystal blue oceans, and golden banners of the Vylari Empire waved proudly in every breeze. To the Vylari, this world was the jewel of their civilization, perfect, graceful, and superior. Or so they believed. Princess Sarai Vylari, only 14 by her people's age, had just begun to attend the royal councils. Though young, she was sharp-tongued, proud, and curious. She had been raised among nobles who praised her every word, and so she spoke often, believing her voice carried truth. The palace was preparing for the arrival of guests, humans, from the distant planet called Earth. The Vylari nobles whispered among themselves with amusement and mild contempt. Humanity was still young in the stars, not even 1,000 years into galactic travel. To the proud Vylari they were newcomers, strong perhaps but unsophisticated. Sarai had never seen a human before. She had only heard stories, that they were bold, stubborn, and full of strange emotions. When her father, Emperor Kale, told her that humans were coming to help fix the failing planetary defense grid, she had laughed softly. "Father," she said with a gentle but mocking smile, "must we really call them for help? We have engineers. Surely the great Vylari Empire does not need humans to fix our walls." Her father only smiled with patience. "Sarai, you will learn that pride cannot hold back disaster. The humans are not as weak as our people think." Still, she doubted him. The day of the meeting arrived. The great hall of the palace glittered with crystal columns and hovering light spheres. The Vylari nobles stood in perfect formation, dressed in flowing silver robes. At the far end of the hall stood Sarai, beside her father's throne, her long blue hair tied with golden ribbons. Her bright violet eyes were filled with curiosity and the faintest hint of amusement. Then the doors opened. The human delegation entered, their boots echoing against the polished floor. They did not wear ornate robes, only simple dark uniforms with badges of Earth's nations. Their leader, an older diplomat named Captain Reiner, bowed politely. Behind him walked a man in a gray engineer's uniform, carrying a case of tools. He looked calm, tall, and serious. His name was Eli Morgan. There was something different about him. His eyes were quiet, but there was strength behind them, a stillness like a deep ocean. Sarai noticed that he didn't stare in awe at the palace or the glowing banners like most aliens did. He simply looked around, studying everything as if trying to understand how it all worked. Her first thought was that he looked too ordinary. Her second thought was that he seemed too confident for someone of a lesser species. Captain Reiner greeted the Emperor respectfully. "Your Majesty, we are honored to assist the Vylari Empire. Engineer Morgan is one of our finest. He will inspect your defense systems and repair the orbital shields." The Emperor thanked them warmly, but Sarai couldn't resist a small laugh. "So this is your finest?" she said softly, stepping forward with a graceful smile. "Forgive me, but he looks more like a mechanic than a savior." Her attendants chuckled nervously. Eli turned his eyes toward her but said nothing. The silence made her feel oddly uneasy. Usually when she made fun of someone, they either looked away or laughed politely. But this man's calm eyes simply looked at her, not with anger but with quiet disappointment. She crossed her arms, trying to cover her sudden discomfort. "Tell me, human," she said with an amused tone, "how many great empires have you built? How many worlds have you ruled? Or do humans still think they are the center of the universe?" Her father's eyes narrowed slightly, but he did not interrupt. He wanted to see how the human would respond, but Eli didn't respond at all. He just looked at her one last time, then slowly turned, placed his tool case on the ground, picked it up again, and walked away without a single word. The hall fell completely silent. Even the hum of the floating lights seemed to fade. The alien nobles stared in shock. No one had ever turned their back on a Vylari princess before, especially not a foreign guest. Sarai blinked in surprise, feeling her cheeks grow warm. "Did he just walk away?" she whispered. Captain Reiner cleared his throat awkwardly. "Engineer Morgan means no offense, Your Highness. He simply prefers to work rather than talk." But the damage was done. The room's mood had shifted. The princess's laughter had vanished. And in the quiet, everyone felt something heavy. Respect, perhaps, or shame. Eli Morgan continued walking down the long corridor without looking back. Later that day, Sarai sat in her private chamber, replaying the moment in her mind. It wasn't the insult that bothered her, it was his silence. He hadn't argued or defended himself. He hadn't even seemed angry. It was as if her words didn't matter enough to deserve a reply. Her attendants tried to cheer her up. "He is only human, Princess." They lack proper manners, but she didn't feel satisfied by that answer. "Why did he walk away?" she asked softly, staring out at the glowing city below her window. "He could have spoken. He could have corrected me. But he didn't." Her tutor, an elderly scholar named Master Valen, bowed slightly. "Perhaps he has the strength to remain calm where others would argue." Sarai frowned. "Calm? That was arrogance. Or dignity," said Valen gently. "Sometimes silence speaks louder than pride." Sarai said nothing after that. But her thoughts kept returning to the image of the human walking away, not in defeat, not in anger, but in peace. Meanwhile, far below the palace, Eli worked in the defense control station with a small group of human and Valari engineers. The systems were old, their circuits corroded, and their power relays unstable. He spoke little, focusing on his tasks. His mind wasn't on the insult, it was on the work. The defense grid was failing, and if it wasn't fixed soon, the planet would be defenseless. A young Valari technician asked quietly, "Sir, were you not offended by what the princess said?" Eli looked up from his work and replied calmly, "Offense is a choice. I came here to repair machines, not to win arguments." The technician nodded, surprised by the simplicity of his answer. He had never met someone so direct and unbothered by words. Eli continued working late into the night. The storm outside rumbled against the windows, lightning flashing across the ocean. He didn't look back toward the palace once. In the palace, Princess Sarai couldn't sleep. The storm outside echoed the noise in her heart. She had always believed that power came from speaking loudly, commanding respect with words. But now she wasn't sure. She went to the balcony and looked out into the dark sky. From her high tower, she could see a small cluster of lights far away, the human outpost near the coast, where Eli was working even now. For some reason, she whispered to herself, "Maybe I shouldn't have said that." She didn't know why she cared so much. She had offended many before, rivals, servants, even visiting nobles, and never felt a thing. But this time, the silence she received in return felt heavier than all the words she'd ever spoken. Perhaps, she thought, humans weren't as simple as she had believed. When morning came, the Emperor summoned her to his private hall. He looked serious but calm. "Sarai," he said, "you are young and your spirit is bright. But you must learn the weight of your words." She lowered her head. "I know, Father." "I hope you will learn from this human," he said. "He is not proud, yet he is not weak. That is a rare balance." Sarai looked up. "Do you think he will forgive me?" Her father smiled faintly. "He already has. But it is you who must forgive yourself." The princess left quietly, her thoughts deep and confused. Outside, the first light of day touched the palace towers. The storm had passed. Yet inside her heart, something new had begun, the first small crack in the wall of her pride. The next few days on DEATHWORLD were calm, yet something had changed within the palace. Ever since the meeting in the Great Hall, whispers filled every corridor. Servants and nobles alike spoke quietly about the strange moment when a human, a simple engineer, had turned his back on Princess Sarai without a single word. Some said it was an insult. Others said it was courage. But everyone agreed on one thing: it was something new. No one had ever dared do such a thing before. Princess Sarai, meanwhile, tried to appear calm. She carried herself with her usual pride during the daily court meetings, but inside she was uneasy. Her father had said that the human's silence was not arrogance but strength. Still, she didn't understand it. Why did a single moment of silence hurt more than any insult? When she looked into the mirror, she almost expected to see that same quiet disappointment in her reflection. The same look Eli Morgan had given her before walking away. That evening, as the twin moons of Artis rose above the horizon, Sarai decided to see for herself what the human was doing. She left her royal chambers quietly, wearing a long hooded cloak. No guards followed her. She didn't want anyone to know. The air outside the palace was cool and smelled faintly of metal from the factories below. She rode a hover carriage down the narrow path toward the coast, where the humans had built their small base beside the defense control tower. From a distance, she saw the soft blue glow of machinery. Humans and Valari engineers worked side by side, but she noticed something unusual. The humans didn't order anyone around. They didn't raise their voices. They just worked silently, carefully, helping wherever they were needed. At the center of it all stood Eli Morgan. His uniform was plain, his sleeves rolled up as he adjusted a panel of glowing circuits. His hands moved with precision. Every motion seemed steady and sure. Sarai hid behind a nearby console, watching him for several minutes. She didn't know why she was nervous. She had met ambassadors, generals, even warlords. None of them had ever made her feel like this, uncertain, thoughtful, or small. She stepped forward finally, her heart beating a little faster. "Human," she said softly. Eli paused but didn't turn immediately. When he did, his face was calm as ever. "Your Highness," he said quietly, "this area is restricted. The power grid is unstable. You should return to the palace." His voice wasn't harsh, only factual, like an instruction. "I came to see your progress," she replied, trying to sound confident. "My father says the defense system is improving." "Yes," Eli said, turning back to his work. "We've stabilized the lower grid, but it will take time to complete the full system. Your engineers are assisting well." His words were polite but distant. He didn't look at her again. Sarai felt her pride stir. She wasn't used to being ignored. "You speak very little," she said finally. "Is that your way? Humans prefer silence?" Eli connected another wire before answering. "Silence helps me think. Talking too much can make you forget what's important." The princess frowned. "Are you saying I talk too much?" Eli looked at her then, his expression calm, not mocking. "I'm saying that listening often teaches more than speaking." Sarai didn't know how to respond. She wanted to argue, but for some reason she couldn't find the right words. The storm clouds above began to rumble. A low, deep thunder rolled across the sky. Eli glanced upward. "You should leave, Princess. The storm is moving in fast. Will you not seek shelter?" she asked. He shook his head. "The system must stay online. I'll stay until it's stable." Something in his voice, simple determination, made her hesitate. No noble would ever risk their comfort for duty. She watched him work for a few seconds more, then turned back toward her carriage. When she reached the palace again, the first drops of rain began to fall. That night, as lightning flashed outside her window, Sarai sat awake thinking about the human engineer standing alone in the storm. He hadn't bowed, hadn't begged for forgiveness, and yet he had earned her respect without even trying. The next morning, the palace was buzzing with news. The defense system's first sector had come fully online for the first time in years. The humans' repairs had doubled the shield's strength. Even the Emperor seemed pleased. "The humans work well," he said during the council. "Their methods are different, simple but effective. Perhaps we should learn from them." Several nobles looked uneasy. "Learn from humans?" one of them whispered. "Surely we are above such lessons." Sarai stayed quiet. Her father's eyes met hers for a brief moment, and he smiled slightly, as if he knew she was beginning to understand. Over the next week, the collaboration between the two species continued. The Vylari engineers slowly began to admire the humans' work. They discovered that human designs were not as primitive as they had thought. They were practical, reliable, and easy to maintain, made for endurance rather than elegance. Eli Morgan became the silent center of the entire operation. He worked from dawn to night without complaint. When problems arose, he solved them without drama. When others grew tired or frustrated, he encouraged them quietly. He rarely smiled, yet his presence seemed to calm everyone around him. One afternoon, Sarai visited the worksite again, this time openly, with 2 guards. Eli greeted her with a small nod. "I see the shields are working," she said, watching the glowing arcs of energy shimmer across the sky. "Yes, the system will hold now," he replied. "Your world is safer." "You've done well," she said softly. It was the closest she had come to an apology. Eli looked at her, then said simply, "It's my job." "Only your job?" she asked. "You worked through the storm. That was not duty, that was dedication." He hesitated for a moment, then replied, "When people depend on you, you don't stop just because it's hard. Humans have learned that lesson many times." His words struck her deeply. She thought of her own people, how easily they gave orders, how rarely they took risks themselves. For the first time, she bowed her head slightly. "Then I hope we can learn from you." Eli didn't answer, but the faintest smile appeared on his face. That night, Sarai walked alone through the royal gardens. The wind was cool, carrying the scent of the ocean. The stars above shimmered like silver dust. Her old tutor, Master Valen, joined her quietly. "You've been thoughtful these days, Princess. Is it because of the human?" She nodded. "He is unlike anyone I've met. He speaks little, yet I keep thinking about his words." "Silence," said Valen, "can echo longer than speech. Perhaps his silence is teaching you something you were not ready to learn before." Sarai looked at the stars. "I think it is teaching me to listen." Far below, Eli watched the same sky from his workstation. The defense system was now stable, and the danger had passed for the moment. Yet his thoughts drifted toward the young princess who had once mocked him. He wasn't angry. He had seen pride like hers before, in soldiers, leaders, and even himself when he was younger. Pride was not evil. It was just a wall people built when they were afraid to be wrong. He hoped that one day, she would understand that true strength came not from status or words, but from humility and purpose. As the night deepened, the defense grid pulsed with steady light, spreading across the sky like a giant shield. The world was safe again for now, and somewhere in the palace above, a young princess sat by her window, looking at that same light, thinking of the human who never raised his voice, yet somehow changed the way she saw the universe. The following days on Artus Prime were peaceful, almost too peaceful. The skies glowed softly under the twin suns, and the newly repaired defense grid shimmered like a web of light across the horizon. The Vailari people began to relax, believing their world was now untouchable. In the royal court, praise filled the air. Nobles congratulated each other for their wisdom in calling for human aid, though few mentioned Eli Morgan's name directly. To them, he was just an engineer, helpful, yes, but still human. Only Princess Sarai knew better. She had watched him work, had seen his calm persistence. His silence had taught her more about duty than all her royal lessons. Since that night, she often looked to the sky and wondered how someone could be so strong without needing to prove it. But peace, as always, was fragile. It began one quiet evening. Sarai was in the palace library, reading reports about the defense network's progress when a sharp alarm suddenly echoed through the corridors. The sound was deep and cold, like thunder rolling across stone. It was the planetary alert tone, one that had not been heard for decades. Her heart jumped. Guards rushed in at once, their faces pale. "Your Highness," one shouted. "Unidentified ships have entered orbit." Sarai froze. "Pirates?" The guard nodded grimly. "A fleet. At least 20 ships. They're heavily armed. The Emperor has ordered all civilians to shelter underground." The halls erupted in chaos. Servants hurried to safety. Soldiers took positions, and the calm palace suddenly became a fortress. Sarai followed the guards toward the command room, her chest tight with fear. When she entered, the great screen showed the blackness of space filled with moving dots, enemy ships closing in fast. Her father, Emperor Kale, stood beside the generals. His face was calm but tense. "Activate the defense grid," he commanded. Engineers worked quickly, but something was wrong. Warning lights flickered. The grid shimmered uncertainly, then dimmed. "The power levels are dropping," shouted one technician. "The lower array isn't responding." Sarai felt dread rise in her chest. "But it was stable." Eli said it was working. "Where is the human?" asked the Emperor. One of the officers turned. "He's at the coastal station, Majesty, still monitoring the main relay." "Then call him," Kale ordered. At that same moment, miles away at the human outpost, Eli Morgan was already at work. The air was filled with the sound of alarms and the distant rumble of explosions. Through the windows, he could see streaks of fire cutting through the atmosphere. Enemy landing pods heading for the surface. He spoke calmly into his communicator. "This is Morgan. The grid's lower circuit has been hit by an overload. I'm rerouting power now, but we need to stabilize the main reactor. Enemy ships are approaching the palace," came the urgent reply. "I know," Eli said, his voice steady. "Keep your shields up. I'll hold the grid." His human and Vailari assistants worked beside him, their hands shaking as the floor trembled. Eli moved with purpose, adjusting cables, sealing conduits, and typing commands faster than anyone else in the room. A young Vailari technician looked at him with fear. "Sir, the pirates are landing." "We should evacuate." Eli didn't look up. "If we leave, the grid will fail. If the grid fails, your city will burn. Stay with me or go. Your choice." The technician hesitated, then stayed. Outside, lightning flashed across the sky as the first pirate dropships entered the atmosphere. In the palace, Sarai stood by her father as the command room shook from a distant blast. The sky outside was filled with streaks of red light. "The outer districts are under attack," shouted a general. "Where is the human?" Sarai demanded. Why isn't he answering? Then, through the static of the communicator, a calm voice came. "This is Morgan," Eli said. "Main reactor is unstable. I'm going in to repair it manually." The Emperor's voice boomed over the channel. "You'll be killed!" "We can't lose the system now," Eli replied. "If I don't fix it, you'll lose the whole planet." Then the line went silent again. Sarai felt her throat tighten. She wanted to scream for him to stop, but something inside told her he wouldn't listen. Not out of stubbornness, but because he had already decided what needed to be done. At the outpost, smoke filled the corridor. Sparks flew from the ceiling. Eli ran through the chaos carrying a toolkit in one hand. He reached the containment chamber, an enormous cylinder glowing with unstable blue light. The readings were spiking dangerously. He spoke into his wristband. "Starting manual override. Lock down the upper gates." The technician's voice came through, trembling. "But you'll be trapped inside." "Then keep it locked," Eli said firmly. He stepped into the chamber. The door sealed behind him with a heavy clang. Inside, the heat was unbearable. Energy arcs danced across the reactor core, and the control panels flickered wildly. Eli's eyes narrowed in focus. His hands moved quickly, typing commands, rerouting circuits, replacing burnt-out cores. He ignored the sweat on his face and the pain in his fingers. Every second mattered. Outside, the pirates' bombardment shook the ground. The sky turned orange from fire. Back at the palace, the Emperor turned to his daughter. "We must prepare to evacuate the civilians underground. If the grid fails, we can't defend the capital." Sarai clenched her fists. "He's still in there. The human is trying to save us." Her father gave her a sad look. "He is brave, Sarai, but bravery cannot always stop fate." She shook her head. "No, you said humans were strong in spirit. I believe you now." "He won't fail." Minutes passed like hours. The palace shook again. Dust fell from the ceiling. Then suddenly a deep hum filled the air, a rising vibration that grew louder and stronger. The great screen flashed to life. "The grid is coming online," someone shouted. "Power levels rising, stabilizing." Outside, the sky turned brilliant white. Arcs of light spread from the horizon, connecting into a vast web that surrounded the planet. The pirate ships, caught in the sudden surge, were struck by beams of energy that tore through their hulls. One by one, the enemy vessels exploded into dust. Cheers erupted across the command room. The Emperor looked to the sky, relief washing over his face. But Sarai did not cheer. She stared at the screen, searching for any signal from the outpost. "Eli," she whispered, "please answer." Static filled the channel. Then faintly, his voice came through. "Grid stable. Mission complete." "Eli," she cried into the communicator. "Come back to the palace." "You did it." But there was no reply. The transmission cut out completely. An hour later, after the skies cleared and the last pirate ship fled into the void, Sarai traveled to the coastal outpost with a squad of guards. The once bright station was now blackened by smoke. She rushed inside, her heart pounding. The control chamber was half destroyed, but the lights still glowed faintly blue. There, lying near the reactor's cooling pipe, she found Eli Morgan, unconscious but alive. "Get him to the med bay," she shouted. The guards lifted him carefully and carried him out. As they left, she turned to look at the glowing reactor. The light reflected in her eyes, soft and steady. He had saved them all, not for honor, not for reward, but simply because it was the right thing to do. For the first time in her young life, Princess Sarai felt true humility. When Eli woke hours later in the palace medical wing, he found the Emperor and the princess standing beside him. He tried to sit up, but Sarai stopped him gently. "You should rest," she said quietly. "You saved Artie's Prime." Eli blinked slowly. "Is everyone safe?" "Yes," she said. "Because of you." He nodded once, as if that was all he needed to hear. The Emperor spoke next. "You will be honored for this, Eli Morgan. The Vailari Empire owes you a debt beyond measure." But Eli only shook his head. "No honors needed, Majesty. I just did my job." The Emperor smiled softly. "A job well done, then." Sarai looked at him, her voice low but sincere. You once told me that listening teaches more than speaking. I didn't understand then, but now I do. Eli gave a small, tired smile. Then I'm glad something good came from my silence. Outside, the twin suns rose again over the shining towers of Artus Prime. The world had survived. But for Princess Sarai, everything had changed. She had seen a human's courage. She had seen how quiet strength could protect an entire world. And in that silence, she had found her first lesson in what true leadership meant. The sun had just risen over Artus Prime when Eli Morgan awoke in the palace medical wing. The room was quiet, soft light streaming through the tall windows. His head ached from exhaustion, and his hands were still stained with the tools he had used to repair the planetary defense grid. The hum of the restored systems outside was a gentle reminder of what he had accomplished. Princess Sarai stood nearby, her arms folded, watching him carefully. Her expression was thoughtful, not curious, not playful, but serious. In the weeks since the attack, she had begun to understand what courage truly meant. Eli, she said softly, "Are you hurt?" He shook his head. "Just tired." His voice was quiet, almost weary, but calm. "Nothing that will stop me from working tomorrow." She frowned. "You don't understand. You risked your life yesterday. You could have died. You could have been gone before anyone even knew what happened." Eli's lips curved slightly into a faint smile. "Then it's a good thing I didn't die. But dying wouldn't have changed what needed to be done." The grid had to hold. Sarai felt her chest tighten. He wasn't proud, he wasn't boastful, yet everything he said carried a weight that made her feel small in the best possible way. Later, the Emperor entered the room. His golden robes shimmered in the morning light and his expression was grave but proud. "Eli Morgan," he said, "the Valari Empire owes you more than words can express. You have saved our planet. We wish to honor you with the Medal of Eternal Valor and a lifetime of service as an advisor to the Emperor himself." Eli shook his head gently. "I don't want honors, Majesty. I didn't do this for medals. I did what needed to be done. That is all." The Emperor paused. Then he smiled. "It is rare to meet someone with such humility. Very well, the choice is yours. But know that your deeds will be remembered for generations." Sarai watched him carefully. Her violet eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in curiosity. She had never met anyone who refused glory so simply. Every noble in her court would have demanded praise, decorations, and a place in the history books. Eli had done none of that. Why? She asked quietly. Why refuse? Why not accept what you deserve? Eli looked at her, his calm eyes meeting hers. Because my duty is not to pride or reward. It is to life. To protect people. That is what matters. Sarai felt a strange warmth in her chest. His words were simple, yet they held a truth she could feel deep inside her. For the first time, she understood that strength did not always come from power or status. Sometimes, it came from quiet resolve and purpose. The day passed in preparation for the formal recognition of the humans' assistance. The Valari court was bustling with activity, nobles discussing the heroic humans and their contributions. Sarai remained in her private chamber, thinking about the events of the past week. She remembered the first moment they had met, when she mocked him, and he had turned and walked away without a word. At the time, she had thought his silence was arrogance. Now she realized it had been strength, discipline, a kind of courage she had never seen before. Her tutor, Master Valen, appeared at her side. "You have changed, Princess," he said gently. "It is the work of the humans' example. You are learning to see what truly matters." Sarai nodded, still quiet. "I thought he was simple, weak, but he is neither. He is stronger than any of us." Valen smiled. "Sometimes it is not the loudest voice that changes the world, but the quietest." That afternoon, Sarai visited Eli again in the medical wing. He had insisted on sitting up despite the Emperor's orders to rest and was quietly reading a small notebook. "You should stay resting," she said firmly. "Your body needs it. You have done enough." Eli looked up. "Resting does nothing for tomorrow's work. The grid will need maintenance and humans will help rebuild the damaged circuits." Sarai sighed. "You do so much, yet never ask for recognition. You do not even want thanks." He closed the notebook and met her gaze. "Recognition is meaningless if the work is done for the wrong reasons. I do what is right because it is right, not because someone will praise me." Her hands clenched slightly at her sides. "Then why do you stay here helping us?" He paused before answering. "Because someone must. You needed help, and I could give it. My people trained me for this, to act when needed. It is not about pride. It is about responsibility. Sarai's lips parted slightly. For the first time, she felt a kind of admiration she could not put into words. Over the next few days, the humans worked alongside the Vylari engineers to repair damage from the attack. The nobles and soldiers watched in awe as Eli quietly guided the work, giving instructions only when necessary, correcting mistakes gently, and never raising his voice. The engineers began to realize that humans were different, not weaker, not fragile, but persistent, focused, and disciplined. Even Princess Sarai began to see a new path for herself. She walked among the engineers, observing them, and thought about how her own people could learn from these visitors. She saw courage not in loud commands, but in the steady hands of a man willing to risk everything without seeking glory. At night, she would watch Eli from her balcony, the glow of the repair lights reflecting in the ocean below. She thought about his quiet actions, his calm words, and his refusal to accept accolades. For the first time, she felt a mixture of admiration and humility, feelings she had never experienced before. One evening, after the repairs were complete, Sarai found herself alone with Eli in the palace gardens. The air was cool, the stars reflecting on the crystal fountains. "You didn't have to do all of this," she said softly. "You could have left after the first repairs. You could have stayed safe." Eli looked at her quietly. "And let the planet fall? Let people die when I could prevent it? No, I could not. You called me here to help, and help I did. That is all there is to it." Sarai considered his words. They were simple, but each one carried weight. "And you will not take recognition?" "I have all I need," he said. "The world is safer. People are alive. That is enough." She stared at him. "You are, unlike anyone I have ever met." Eli smiled faintly. "Thank you. That is kind." That night, Sarai returned to her chambers. She sat by her window and looked at the repaired city below. The lights were steady, the streets safe, and the defense grid pulsed softly in the distance. Her mind returned to the moment when she had mocked him in the palace hall. She felt a flicker of shame for her pride in her words, and yet in that moment she understood something profound. Strength was not about words or wealth or titles. Strength was about action. Strength was about responsibility. Strength was about humility. For the first time, Princess Sarai felt a deep respect for humans, and especially for the silent engineer who had taught her this lesson without raising his voice, without demanding recognition, and without showing anger. The next morning, the Emperor called a meeting. Eli was present, though he declined the formal honors once more. Princess Sarai watched him from across the hall. When the Emperor spoke of heroism and leadership, Sarai found herself speaking quietly but with conviction. "I have learned something," she said. "Leadership is not only about command. It is about responsibility. Courage is not about glory. It is about action. And strength is not shown in words but in deeds." The court fell silent. Eli met her gaze, a faint smile on his face. The princess had finally understood the lesson he had been teaching all along. As the council ended, Sarai walked beside Eli. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. His presence was enough. She had learned from him without a single word being forced. For the first time, she felt the beginnings of trust, not just in him but in the power of humans, and in herself to learn from them. The stars above GalacticPrime twinkled brightly, reflecting on the city below. In that quiet night, two worlds began to understand one another, through courage, humility, and silent strength. The weeks after the pirate attack passed quietly. GalacticPrime was no longer under immediate threat, yet the memory of those days lingered in the minds of its people. The Vylari Empire had always believed that their strength alone could protect them, but the humans had shown them something far more important: courage, discipline, and humility. Princess Sarai spent most of her days observing the humans at work. She would walk among the engineers and soldiers, asking questions, watching their methods, and learning how they thought. Eli Morgan continued his quiet work, repairing minor systems and advising Vylari engineers. Though he had refused formal honors, his influence grew silently. The Vylari began to respect his approach to problem-solving, noting the efficiency and patience in his every move. One afternoon, Sarai found herself walking alongside Eli near the palace gardens. The twin suns hung low in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the fountains and stone paths. "You have changed this world," she said softly. "Not just the defense grid, but the way people think. Even my people are starting to see things differently because of you." Eli glanced at her, expression calm. "I only did my job. You are the one learning from it." Sarai smiled faintly, but it was not the playful smile she often wore. It was serious, reflective. "I have learned more than I ever thought I could from someone like you and a human." He tilted his head slightly. "Then perhaps the galaxy is not as different as it seems. Different species, different strengths. But lessons can travel anywhere," she nodded. "Yes, and I think I finally understand. Leadership is not about pride. It is about responsibility. Courage is not about words. It is about action." Eli's faint smile returned. "Then perhaps you will be a good leader one day, Princess." "I hope so," she said softly. The days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The palace became a center for collaboration. Valari engineers worked with humans on upgrades, improving the defense grid even further. Ships were repaired, training programs established, and new technologies were studied. Through it all, Princess Sarai observed silently, learning patience, humility, and the value of listening before speaking. Eli never forced her to understand. He simply acted with consistency, demonstrating through example what it meant to lead with purpose. The people began to notice the change. Soldiers were calmer in the field, engineers more disciplined, and even nobles began to temper their arrogance with practicality. A quiet revolution had begun, not through words or decrees, but through the simple, steady influence of a human who refused praise. One evening, Sarai stood on her balcony looking out at the repaired city. The light sparkled across the water, reflecting a world that had survived danger and learned from it. Eli appeared beside her quietly, as he always did. "You are thinking about the future," he said simply. She nodded. "Yes, I wonder, will humans always be like this? So steady, so focused, so strong without needing recognition?" He looked at her, calm as ever. "Some will be. Others will learn. But strength does not require proof. It exists quietly, ready when it is needed." Sarai turned to look at him. "I wish all leaders were like you. Perhaps my people could learn even more from humans." Eli's eyes softened slightly. "Then perhaps it is up to you to teach them." Her chest tightened. The words were not a command, but a quiet challenge, and for the first time she felt a true sense of purpose. To take what she had learned and lead her people not with arrogance, but with courage and wisdom. Months later, the Valari Emperor called a council to honor the humans properly. Eli Morgan was asked to attend, though he maintained his quiet refusal of medals or titles. Princess Sarai was by his side. She spoke to the council, her voice calm but firm. "We owe a debt to these humans not only for saving our world, but for showing us how to act with courage, humility, and responsibility. We must remember that strength is not measured in words, wealth, or titles, but in action and purpose." The council fell silent, impressed by her maturity and clarity. Many nobles realized that the lessons Eli had silently taught the princess had now been embraced by the next generation of leaders. Eli looked at Sarai, a faint smile on his face. Though she was still young, her words carried wisdom beyond her years. The princess had grown, shaped in part by his quiet example, yet it was her own reflection that would guide her people forward. Time passed, and the humans eventually returned to their ships, leaving HFY in the hands of its people. Eli Morgan did not linger for glory, nor did he demand recognition. He simply ensured that the systems were stable, and that the knowledge he brought would remain. Princess Sarai stood on the balcony one last time as the human fleet departed. The wind stirred her hair gently, and she felt a sense of both sadness and gratitude. She had learned more in the past months than she had in all her years at court. She whispered quietly to herself, "Thank you for teaching me without even saying much." The world of HFY continued to thrive. Its people became stronger, wiser, and more humble. They remembered the humans not just as saviors, but as teachers, beings who demonstrated courage quietly without boasting, without demanding praise. Princess Sarai grew into a respected leader, guiding her people with wisdom and care. She often recalled Eli Morgan's example, his patience, his quiet determination, and his refusal to seek glory. She made it her mission to lead the Valari not only with strength but with humility. Years later, When young nobles asked her how she had learned so much at such a young age, she would smile softly and say, "Sometimes the greatest lessons come from the quietest voices." And though she never spoke of it openly, she knew that one human, tall, calm, and resolute, had changed not only her life but the future of her world. Eli Morgan's impact endured not through medals or statues, but through the actions he inspired, the lessons he silently taught, and the courage he had quietly shown. The Vylari Empire would never forget him, and neither would Princess Sarai. The twin suns set over the shining towers of Artis Prime. The oceans reflected the sky in silver and gold. The defense grid pulsed steadily in the distance, a reminder of the quiet strength that had saved them all. And high above the city, a young princess, now older, wiser, and humbled, stood watching the horizon. Her heart held gratitude, respect, and a lesson she would carry forever. That courage, humility, and quiet strength could change worlds. In silence, she smiled, knowing that sometimes the most powerful actions speak louder than any words.